Good morning, everyone. This is Tom Farley. I work as a leadership coach and as a mediator, and welcome to our session today, our little webinar about COVID-19, part of a continuing series that Employee and Family Resources has been offering. I work as a leadership coach and have over the last few years. And prior to that, I worked in the Employee Assistance Program, which many of you are familiar with as an EFR service to your organizations. So today's topic really is timely in that I think we're all mentally, emotionally, from a business perspective, turning our attention towards how do we recover? How do we move on from COVID-19? What does the future look like for our organizations, for our teams, for our customers, for the people that we serve? And how do we lead effectively during this time towards the best possible future that we can come up with? So my intention today is really to talk about the issue of creating compassion, being compassionate as a leader, as a best practice, and really defining a culture, a different culture probably than we had before COVID-19 came into our lives in organizations. So leading towards recovery with compassion is our topic, and our goals really looking at the issue of compassion. Compassion was an emerging topic in leadership work before COVID-19. So if you did an internet search on compassion, you saw some of the most recent articles and focus on leadership practices and behavior. It's about leadership behavior and how can we improve how we present to our teams and our organizations, and how can we influence, how can we manage our own behavior and encourage safety and respect and performance in our organization. So we'll look at compassion as a leadership strength in today's workplace. And also briefly, what are some best practices that we can use to inspire our employees during this difficult time? So many of us are not feeling safe for a number of different reasons. And so creating safety in the workplace and on teams, building trust through communications, that's the correlation between behavior and optimal performance in the workplace. So looking towards the future, how can we support best practices and behavior, not only for ourselves as leaders, but for those that we're leading. So as I mentioned, compassion in the workplace has been an emerging topic. And with COVID-19, it's really an opportunity, from the positive point of view, to kind of rewire, to rethink how we approach workplace issues and the whole area of leadership, and to really look at what are some best practices that we can really tune into, become aware of, and weave into our day-to-day choices and operations. So especially right now, compassion, as you can imagine, letting people know that they're cared about, that they are important, that when you think about what employees bring to the table, what they're looking for under normal circumstances, we all want to be appreciated, we all want to be cared about, we all want to feel like we're making a contribution to something bigger than ourselves. Those are the basic human needs that we're all trying to get met, but especially now, it's critical that we try to fill people's buckets from a leadership perspective when they're feeling most unsafe and with so much uncertainty. So compassion and crisis kind of go hand in hand. And unfortunately, many people have thought of compassion as a weakness. Oh, that's not really business-like, or that's not something being compassionate. It's more important to confront people about their lack of performance. But today, the message really is compassion is a leadership strength that we all can do a better job of embracing and it really leads to that better performance that we're all looking for. So, how do we create an environment of respect, and again, of safety on teams, especially when things are hard, and it's really an issue of we're all in the same boat together, and so looking out for each other. And compassion is really about servant leadership. If you think of leadership as how can I support the people that are working with me? How can I encourage their growth? How can I contribute to a legacy of growth and helping people be the best that they can be under difficult circumstances? Compassion in the workplace and servant leadership are two concepts, two areas that really link together in our development work, in our leadership development. So, our goal, how can we encourage happy and healthy and team members who are productive? So there's a lot of research. There's some sources down at the bottom of this slide that talk about, it's really similar to the concept of an employee assistance program, that if we're compassionate, if we provide support to people to deal with stress and mental health concerns and help build their resiliency, we're going to build more loyalty to the organization. If I feel like you're really caring and compassionate for me in a very personal way, especially during this time, then I'm more likely to give above and beyond for a long time in terms of my loyalty and my sense of engagement and my commitment to the organization over the long run. So that's really linked to promoting healthy stress management and wellness from a leadership perspective, and for flying that flag through compassionate behavior and modeling that behavior. So if we have compassion in our organization, we can get the image of people who are healthy, who are communicating well, who are solving problems, who have strong trust-based interpersonal relationships underneath that positive performance. So that's the goal, is how do we build trust on a team, especially in difficult times, or if we've had difficulties, if we've had low trust, what day-to-day practices can we put in place to create the conditions for better connections? It's really about reciprocity. People tend to mimic each other's behavior, and there's a back and forth. So if someone is caring and compassionate and they take the time to listen, I'm more likely to do the same in return. So that's the kind of contagious behavior that we want to mimic, that we want to build seeds for in our organization and on our work teams. We want a reciprocity of this compassionate behavior and practice day to day, minute to minute, especially when things are difficult. So what I'm sort of describing is some best practices already, and promoting a culture of safety. It's about listening. You probably have heard the most important leadership practice is listening, the art of listening. Stephen Covey, listen first to understand before trying to be understood. And if I am being very active in my listening, with using all of my senses, taking the time, making the investment, even when I'm so busy and overwhelmed right now with everything that's going on, it promotes a sense of you're taking the time to listen to me. I feel appreciated. I feel respected. I feel cared about. I feel safe from a psychological perspective. So no practice is more important for leadership. And by the way, we're all leaders, right? I don't have to be in a formal leadership position in order to be an important leader in my organization. So to the extent that we're all leaders, we're all challenged to practice some of these behaviors. So the second thing listed on this one is about empathy. Excuse me. being a model. So effective leaders model the way. And empathy is about tuning into what people are feeling, and usually through active listening. And if I am really tuning into what people are feeling right now, it's a whole lot. It's a whole lot of grief. It's a whole lot of stress. It's a whole lot of getting used to working at home or getting ready to go back into the workplace, or taking care of my kids, trying to be a teacher at the same time that I am trying to be productive in my workplace, at home perhaps. So empathy is about we're all together in solidarity with those new concerns. And the more we can have a sense of it's safe to share that this is hard, and that we're all challenged in our relationships and in our communication and just in keeping ourselves well, that mutual empathy for what's happening can create this solidarity. You know, we're all in the same boat together. And now we need to figure out where we're going and making sure we're rowing in the same direction. So that's about leaders that are tolerant of personal distress, being able to listen. And the hard part about that is I can only do that for so long and have it impact me and my own mental health, my own fatigue level. So leaders that practice being tolerant and effective listeners also have to be aware of the impact of something that we call compassion fatigue, which is a documented research-based syndrome that happens especially in the helping professions. So what can I do to be prevention oriented, and self-care is as important as my attitude towards tolerating and listening and having empathy for what's going on with people. So some other best practices. In times of crisis, as many of you already know, what's really needed is a clarity of what's the plan. And the more I can focus on brevity and being concise and having the plan, my communications be understandable, then they're easier to communicate and to be understood, which is what we absolutely need. So taking action as leaders with clear plans of action, absolutely a best practice. Tuning in, finding the time just for my own self-awareness. So before I share that communication, or before that big meeting or that difficult conversation, really taking the time to slow myself down and to breathe and to focus on mindfulness, compassion, and servant leadership, and this thing called mindfulness are also very popular topics, were before COVID-19. Now we really need to be aware of our thoughts, not worrying so much about what's happened in the past or what may happen in the future, especially with all this uncertainty, but focusing in on just being present right now and being as effective as I can be in mindfulness. So if you want to learn more about those kinds of practices, absolutely many leaders who are focused on their own development are focusing on mindfulness. I'm sure many of you have heard about expressing gratitude. Can't do that enough in 2020 in the middle of the COVID-19 practice, because so many of us are going above and beyond or in new territory. And it's not easy. And so the more our efforts to do so can be recognized publicly or privately, especially, if someone behaves in a compassionate, caring manner above and beyond, shining a big bright light on that behavior, on that action, creates a culture again of reciprocity, of we're all here supporting each other. So it's positive in terms of that positive, compassionate culture. Being vulnerable and authentic as a leader under stress is easy to say and sometimes hard to do. So the more human I can be about my reactions, my own struggles, It's not like as a leader, I'm there to share and do group therapy with my team, but being honest about, my natural, normal human reactions to what's happening, just like everyone else, it says it's believable. You're making yourself vulnerable, and that gives permission to others to do the same. So modeling the way with vulnerability, or what it says on this slide, being authentic. I don't have all the answers. We're all leaders. Let's come up with the answers together. So I guess our goal, if there's one theme to compassion in COVID-19 and leadership practices, it's leading ourselves as well as our organizations towards a new future. And before we can do that, we have to acknowledge what's happened and the impact, and to normalize our reactions and to actually name them. So if I have permission to share my struggles, and we all acknowledge our normal reactions, that's the first step towards turning towards healing and being able to respond differently in the future. So again, it's about promoting healing through compassion, and it's okay to feel what you're going through right now, and then and we can all have permission to share the struggles, that we're all in the same boat, and just that permission helps reduce the stress, that I'm not alone. It is. I'm feeling angry about all this, or I'm feeling lost, or I'm feeling confused, or I'm feeling sad, or I'm feeling new things I've never felt before. So giving people permission to take a little more time to share what we're feeling and going through helps reduce everybody's mental health and reduce our stress. So as you can imagine, those are the seeds for open dialogue. You can imagine a conversation where we start out talking about our struggles, and the next thing you know, we're talking about a new innovation, a new thing we can do that we haven't ever done before to respond in new ways to the current situation. So that's hope, that's strength, that's building on healing together through the culture that we create as leaders. So I mentioned compassion fatigue, actually quite a popular seminar that EFR has offered to employers. Again, if I'm in the helping profession, at some point I can run into a wall, might be the best metaphor, where I am I've been so focused on taking care of others, perhaps I've neglected to take care of myself, or I just have this emotional numbing. My capacity to feel has reached its limit, and so that means that I need to do extra special things as a helper, in particular. And all leaders are helpers, especially if we're compassionate leaders. What can I do to again slow my mind down, practice positive self-talk, focus on mindfulness, and be aware of kind of recharging my batteries in the ways that I know that have worked for me even before COVID-19. So some of that is just our attitude. It's, why is all this happening? Why is it not just to the world and to our country and to our organization, but for me? What's the meaning that I can bring out of it, that there's some opportunity for growth and positive stuff in the middle of all the craziness that's been happening. So I can keep that positive attitude. I have a higher probability of doing so if I am taking care of myself, the basics, wellness, sleep, nutrition, exercise, mindfulness, using the employee assistance program and reaching out for help if that's what I need, Leaders model the way, and we're all leaders. So to the extent that I model self-care and being vulnerable and real, I give permission to others in my organization to do the same. And that can only increase our productivity and our sense of well-being and keep us on the path during difficult times. So just a reminder about the EAP benefits. There for you 24/7, and not only mental health and chemical dependency and family relationships, but also financial and legal and caregiving issues, especially right now, life coaching. So 800-327-4692 when you want to reach out to talk to someone. It's a sign of strength to do so. It's a sign of leadership. It's a sign of being smart enough to take care of yourself if you might really benefit. And it's a sign of being sane. It's a sign of knowing now's the time to reach out and to get some support. And we all have that time at some point in our lives, I would offer to you. So those are my comments. I think we're going to open it up for questions and go from there.
Thank you, Tom. If anyone who is joining us today has a question, you can use the raise your hand function, and that will send a question over to me, and I can facilitate a Q&A with Tom. We'll just wait a couple of minutes to get those questions coming in, and we'll get started.
Sounds good.
While we're waiting for some questions, I will answer one question that came in that was not for Tom, but for EFR. Wondering if we share the slideshows that we do for our webinars. And the answer is no, we don't actually share the PowerPoints out with our clients. However, within 48 hours of a webinar, we do get it posted on our website. So if you go to efr.org, once you get to that landing page, you will see a red banner at the top, and that's kind of our COVID announcement banner. If you click on that, it takes you into a great landing page for all sorts of information related to the COVID crisis. And within there, you can sign up for future webinars and you can view past webinars. So make sure to check that out. All right, we have our first question. Changing behavior is a challenge. For example, having our TMs, and I'm not sure what that is an abbreviation for, wear masks at all times. How can we instill this without discipline and frustration? So this is in a healthcare, team members, yes, obviously. So changing behaviors is a challenge, having team members wear masks at all times in a healthcare setting. How can we instill this without discipline and
tough question. I kind of feel like Dr. Fauci. My first answer is to emphasize the safety issue for everyone on the team, and that it's an issue of I guess it weaves into some of what we've talked about, emphasizing the mutual benefit and supporting each other. In the compassionate act of wearing a mask, even though it's difficult and hot and uncomfortable. It's about flying the flag of safety. To the extent that I think many people relate to that and understand that. There may be some folks on the team that are just unwilling to, in which case then you really don't have a choice but to hold them accountable for their behavior in terms of an action that needs to be taken. So you don't want to resort to that in terms of discipline or some kind of action unless you absolutely have to, but there are times when you do need to do that in almost any workplace and with different behaviors that might put people at risk.
Thank you, Tom. This next question is one that I can certainly relate with. It is coming from a person who is asking, what is the best practice for parents who have fears or concerns of returning their children back to daycare? thus making it difficult for them to return to work?
Well, I think, again, giving people an opportunity to verbalize those fears and to support each other with ways that they're coping. I'm not in that position directly myself, but I do have grandchildren, 10 of them, and I can imagine my 4 sons and 4 daughter-in-laws having those conversations right now, and perhaps having those conversations at work in terms of things that they can do to help them feel safer. I think the fears are going to be there for a while, but for me, it would be a matter of what can I do to ensure safety. Maybe having more conversations with my child care providers about what actions they're taking in their homes or facilities, and having those conversations might encourage me to feel more comfortable that my children are safe. So conversations within the organization that I work with, as well as with the child care providers themselves, to learn what are their practices that they're putting in place.
The next question is regarding leaders being hesitant to express gratitude to a group of people because they think it would discourage others. So some leaders are hesitant to express gratitude to a group of people because they think it would discourage others. Could you comment on this, please?
I understand the concern and the fear. I would encourage people to err on the side of going ahead and expressing gratitude. And sometimes I have to dig a little deep to find something to be grateful for. But to me, that's my charge as a leader, is to what will inspire the other group that is feeling neglected. So to the extent that I wouldn't want to hold back gratitude that is earned and is important in terms of keeping people motivated. I would want to try to extend it out to both groups to the extent that I can to have everyone start modeling that behavior. There's going to be different levels of receptivity to that. I get that.
All right, and then this next question is coming from an individual who says that we are in a work environment where we don't have emotional safety. What can we do besides avoiding certain people and situations to help create a culture of safety?
It's sort of like the serenity prayer. You control what you can control and try to let go of the rest. What you see is that people will find their own ways of creating safety in subgroups or in groups that are not necessarily part of the formal structure. So find whatever support you can and try to model the behavior that you're hoping others would extend to you. And in my experience, that's the part I have control over. I don't have control over how it's received or whether or not they do the same in return. I try to imagine, what's going on. How can I reach this person, even if they're not open to compassion or emotional support. I can only do so much. I can do my best.
Thank you, Tom. And that looks to be all of our questions for today. So thank you to those of you who submitted questions. Really appreciate the Q&A. I think that's one of the more helpful aspects of these webinars, because it seems like, one person has a question, there may be several people with that same question. So big thank you to those of you who contributed to the Q&A, and a huge thanks to Tom for sharing his expertise on this important topic. Tom, is there anything else you'd like to add before we sign off?
No, just stay safe, and thank you for having me.
All right, thank you. And as I had mentioned, the webinar will be posted within about 48 hours on our website. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Goodbye.